What would you do if your legendary scientist father passed away and left you nothing but an old flashlight? Zola thought it was a cruel joke until the night every light in the hospital went out and the flashlight turned itself on, blinking in a strange rhythm. Inside that flicker was a confession. Her father, Bakari Adeyemi, had secretly led the Nyoka Protocol, a banned global surveillance project that violated every known human right. And worse, her name was next on the kill list. This story is built from encrypted optical data Bakari hid inside the light, a truth the world was never meant to see. You'll uncover how a simple flashlight became the biological key to a system powerful enough to watch the entire planet. You'll see the political assassinations, the buried files, and the moment Zola had to choose between silence or exposing everything, even at the cost of her life. It all began with a flicker in the dark, and it ends with a choice that could reshape the world. But before we dive in, where are you watching this from? Drop your country in the comments so I can say hello properly. The monitor blinked once, then went still. A thin line of light slid across Bakari Adeyemi's face, the pulse on his neck fading under the pale blue haze of the hospital. Zola sat beside him, her fingers locked around his, the air humming with the mechanical breath of machines that no longer mattered. Her eyes refused to blink. She had been listening for an hour, to silence, to the weight of time, to the faint rustle of her father's last breaths, as if sound itself might turn into one final word. But he gave none. Instead, he turned his trembling hand, placed a small, battered flashlight in her palm, and whispered, "In the light, there's truth, and you must bear it." Then his grip softened. The light flickered once, then stilled. Zola froze. The words didn't sound like comfort. They sounded like a burden wrapped in love. The lawyers arrived minutes after he was gone. Two men in gray suits, briefcases snapping like traps. Their condolences were short, polite, meaningless. The will was read right there, in the same cold room where her father's body still lay. "To my son, Kofi Adeyemi, I leave $600 million in assets and corporate shares. To my daughter, Zola Adeyemi, I leave—" The lawyer hesitated, glancing at the small flashlight still resting in her palm. This personal item of sentimental value. His voice cracked on the word sentimental, as if it embarrassed him. Zola's throat closed. She didn't speak. She simply nodded, feeling the sterile air around her thicken. Kofi wasn't there. He hadn't even called. She imagined him somewhere high above the city, champagne in hand, the way he always smiled when things went his way. But her father hadn't been senile. There was a reason. There had to be. The room lights dimmed for a moment, and then, without warning, everything went black. A soft click. The flashlight in her hand turned itself on. She hadn't touched the switch. The beam trembled, stuttered, then blinked in a rhythm. Short, long, short, long. She frowned. Morse code? The pulse repeated, steadying into a pattern that painted trembling bars of light on the wall. "Is this what you meant, Papa?" The thought came like a whisper. The rhythm slowed, then aligned with the heart monitor's dying line. Zola's hand shook, but she kept watching. When the pattern finally stilled, it formed a precise sequence, almost too deliberate to be random. She recorded it on her phone, her breath coming fast, heart pounding with the impossible thought that her father had left a message, not in words, but in light. When she stepped out of the hospital, the city was a sheet of wet glass. Neon bled through drizzle, and the smell of ozone clung to her coat. She held the flashlight tight, like it might vanish if she loosened her grip. By the time she reached her apartment, thunder was rolling in from the west. She dropped her coat, sat at the desk, replayed the recorded light pattern on her phone, and aimed the flashlight at a blank wall. It blinked back, pale and trembling. She used her camera in high-speed mode, slowing each frame. The sequence resolved into a binary stream, zeros and ones, just like the codes she'd watched her father debug when she was little. She translated it through a software filter. A single line of text appeared. Video Bakari Final Move. Her breath hitched. She searched her old hard drives, the ones that had gathered dust for years, until she found one labeled simply Nyoka. Her father's old project, the one she'd never been allowed to open. When the video started, his face filled the screen. Not the man she'd just seen lifeless, but the version she remembered from her childhood. Eyes steady, voice firm. "Zola," he began, "if you're watching this, it means the truth has come looking for you." His voice was quiet, almost tender. "I created something called Nyoka Protocol. It began as protection, a network meant to foresee crimes before they happened. But men don't like control taken from them. They took it from me, turned it into something else. It watches everyone now, judges, presidents, you." He paused, eyes lowering. "I couldn't destroy it, but I hid a key in plain sight. You, my daughter, are part of that key." The video crackled, static rippling through his voice. "Forgive me for the years I wasn't there. I was trying to fix what I broke, but the system watches me still. If it detects this message opened, it will know. You must—" The screen glitched. A red overlay flashed. "Concurrent access detected." A second device was streaming the same file. Zola's reflection blurred on the monitor, pale and trembling. Then, outside her window, headlights flared in the rain. The car across the street blinked its lights 3 times, pause, twice, matching the code she'd seen in the hospital. She froze, her pulse hammering in her ears. Someone else knew the pattern. Someone else had been waiting for her to use it. She slammed the laptop shut, every light in her apartment suddenly feeling like a target. The city hum outside sounded different now, colder, closer, watching. She sat in darkness for a long while, the only glow coming from the trembling flashlight in her lap. She turned it over. It was heavier than it should have been. She pried the base open. Inside, instead of batteries, there was a metal core, compact, engraved with micro-etchings too fine to read. A code lattice, not decoration, but design. She felt the faint vibration of an active current, like a pulse trapped in steel. The words her father had spoken echoed again. "In the light, there's truth, and you must bear it." It wasn't metaphor. It was instruction. She moved carefully, setting up her camera again, zooming close on the engravings. The lens reflected her own eye, wide and red from sleeplessness. Frame by frame, she caught the microscopic grooves aligning into tiny sequences, optical cipher code. Her father had hidden data inside light itself. She felt a mix of pride and dread twisting through her chest. Why would he leave this with her unless he knew it was already too late for him? The rain grew heavier outside, drumming against glass, filling the silence with nervous rhythm. She pulled her phone closer, ready to upload the footage into a decryption program, but then paused. Her father's words from the video came back, clear and unfinished. "If it detects this message opened, it will know." Maybe the signal from her device had already reached them. Maybe that was why the headlights had blinked in response. She unplugged everything, heart pounding. The light of the flashlight dimmed, as if aware of her hesitation. The room plunged into half shadow, and for a second she thought she saw movement reflected on the wet window, someone standing just outside the frame of her view. She rose slowly, barefoot on the cold floor, listening. The hum of the fridge, the tick of the wall clock, the distant whoosh of cars, all normal. But beneath it, faint, there was another rhythm. 1, 2, pause, 1, knocking. Her stomach knotted. It was impossible to tell whether it came from upstairs or the hallway or somewhere inside the walls. She turned off the flashlight, holding it like a weapon, breathing through her teeth. Silence. Then another soft tap, this time on the window itself. She turned, fast. Nothing. Just the reflection of her own face, pale and trembling in the glass. Her phone buzzed on the desk. Unknown number. A message popped up. "You shouldn't have opened it." Her throat went dry. She didn't answer. A second message followed. "He tried to protect you. Don't make it harder." She dropped the phone as if it burned. It landed screen down, the vibration crawling through the table. She backed away, eyes fixed on the door. For a moment, the world narrowed to the sound of rain, the soft flicker of the dying bulb overhead, and the weight of the flashlight in her hand. The beam glowed again, weaker now, fluttering in a rhythm she no longer recognized. She watched, realizing the light was signaling back, not random, not mechanical. Responsive. A code looping to something outside, like a heartbeat trying to answer its twin. Her knees gave slightly. The last thing her father had built was alive in her hands, or something close to it. The irony made her want to laugh and cry at once. She stepped toward the window, the light trembling across her fingertips, and whispered, barely audible, "What did you build, Papa?" The answer came not in words, but in a single flash. Longer, sharper, blinding. For a fraction of a second, she thought she saw a face in that glare. Or maybe it was a reflection. Maybe. When the light steadied, her own face stared back at her in the glass, ghost-like, framed by rain streaks, eyes reflecting twin points of brightness. The phone buzzed again. She forced herself to look. This time the message wasn't text. It was a short clip, grainy security footage from the hospital corridor, time-stamped 20 minutes before her father's death. In the frame, Bakari Adeyemi was lying on his bed. A man in a dark coat stood beside him, his back to the camera, holding something metallic. The man leaned down, said something, then turned his head just enough for the camera to catch half his profile. The image was distorted, but Zola knew that face. She froze, every vein in her body tightening. It was Kofi, her brother. He had been there. The flashlight slipped from her hand, clattering against the floor. The beam spun wildly, scattering light across the walls until it landed on the framed photo of their family, the last one taken before their mother died. Kofi's smile in that picture was wide, confident. The same smile she'd seen the night he told her she wasn't built for power. The light trembled over his face, then dimmed, almost fading completely. She pressed a hand to her mouth to keep from making a sound. A storm siren wailed somewhere far off. The lights in her apartment flickered once more, the building groaning with the wind. She knelt to pick up the flashlight, its warmth now almost human. "You knew," she whispered. "You knew he'd come for me." The power went out completely. Only the faint blue of the flashlight's core remained, pulsing like a heart under her palm. In that glow, she could almost hear her father's voice again, calm and patient. "In the light there's truth, and you must bear it." She sat there in the dark, her breath shallow, the city's power grid collapsing into silence around her. For a moment she thought of running, to anywhere, to nowhere, but the light in her hand blinked again. Not random. A pattern. The same one from the hospital, only slower, more deliberate. She picked up her phone, recording it once more, tears mixing with the rain leaking from the cracked window. Whatever this was, it wasn't finished. Whatever her father had left behind, it wasn't meant to be buried. Outside, the headlights across the street turned off, one by one, until only darkness remained. Zola stood there, small against the vast quiet of the city, holding the single thing her father had trusted her with. The light in her hand flickered weakly, then steadied, like it was waiting for her next move. She whispered into the dark, voice trembling but certain, "I'm listening." And the flashlight answered, its beam cutting through the black room like a vein of living fire, spelling out the first coordinates of a truth that would not stay hidden. The first knock came like a hammer to bone. 3 sharp raps, just shy of shattering the silence, broke through the heavy air of Zola's apartment. The clock read 2:57 a.m. She hadn't slept. Not really. The flashlight sat next to her laptop, its beam now quiet, dark, but she could still feel it, like a pulse beneath her skin, as if light had memory. Her fingers hovered near the switch, instinct pulling toward it, dread pulling away. Another knock, this time slower, deliberate. She moved to the door, barefoot, heart slamming in her chest like it wanted out. The hallway light outside cast a long shadow under the door. Someone stood close, Too close. Then a voice, calm, low, male. Zola Adeyemi, I was a friend of your father's. I'd like to speak with you. She froze. The voice didn't threaten. It was too even for that. Too prepared. She opened the latch, left the chain on, and cracked the door 2 inches. A man stood there in a dark coat, mid-50s, well-groomed but worn. Black gloves. Rain still glistened on his shoulders. He removed his hat slowly, politely. My name is Temba, he said. I knew Bakari before you were born. She didn't move. The name sat wrong on her tongue, too sharp, too sudden. Still, she let him speak. Your father gave you something, didn't he? A flashlight. Her eyes narrowed. Why would that matter to you? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Because it used to belong to a government project, before it became personal. She shut the door an inch tighter. Bakari wasn't just your father. He was a gatekeeper to something none of us could fully control. That light carries more than warmth, Zola. It carries access, signals, frequencies designed for more than illumination. He reached into his coat slowly and pulled out a small ID badge. Clean lines. Raised seal. His name, photo, and an embedded chip that blinked blue. Here's my clearance. You can scan it if you want. She didn't touch it. Instead, she stepped back, closed the door without a word, and fetched the encrypted USB her father had left behind. Inside it, among the fragmented files, was a string of digital signatures. One line bore the name Temba Nkosi, and next to it, in a red flag column labeled Nyoka Internal Security Risk, a single word, traitor. She opened the door again, chain still on. Her face was colder now. My father also left me a list, she said. Your name was on it. He tilted his head slightly, almost admiring the sharpness in her tone. Then you know he didn't trust easily, or forgive easily, and you're right, he had reasons. But I'm not here for redemption. I'm here to keep you breathing. Outside, a car engine idled. She glanced past his shoulder. Headlights across the street blinked once, twice, then paused. Her chest tightened. The same rhythm. He noticed, didn't turn, but nodded subtly toward the window. They're watching, not just me, not just you, them. Who are they? She asked. He took a step closer. His voice dropped. They're the hunters, not government, not quite private, somewhere in between, and they followed the heat signature from your father's light to this apartment. She stepped back. Her fingers brushed against the flashlight on the table, still off, but it felt alive. You should give it to me, he said. I can make it disappear. You don't want what's inside there waking up. She stared at him for a long moment, then walked back to the table, picked up the flashlight. But instead of handing it over, she turned it on. The beam hit him in the chest, reflected off the wall behind him. Nothing unusual, except his eyes flicked sideways. He saw something. In the corner of the room, the light had caught the edge of a frame, her father's old map, still hanging crooked from yesterday's collapse. But it wasn't the map that mattered. It was the layer underneath. The reflection showed a series of burn marks, scorch trails from laser etching, hidden until the right angle of light revealed them. Temba flinched, just slightly. She noticed, "You're not here to keep me safe," she said. "You're here to keep me from going deeper." He didn't deny it, just exhaled. "Zola, you don't know what your father did to shield you, what he sacrificed to make sure that thing didn't mark you as a target." She held his gaze. Too late. His jaw tensed. "You think this is about inheritance, about secrets, but it's not. It's about legacy, and legacy always has a cost." She closed the door. He didn't knock again. By the time she looked out the window, he was gone. So were the lights across the street. But the rain remained, trickling down the glass in slow patterns, like Morse tears. She sat back at her desk, the flashlight warm in her hands. She pulled out her father's encrypted drive again. Tried something new, this time using the flashlight's blink pattern as input tempo. The algorithm responded. A deeper layer opened. Hidden folders, time-stamped from years ago. Inside one, Field Ops, Internal Risk, she clicked. The first image loaded. A photo, old grainy, but clear enough? Kofi, her brother. Standing next to Temba, both younger, smiling. Behind them, a large banner fluttered in wind. Nyoka Protocol, Tier 1 access only. The date in the corner froze her blood. It was 6 months after Kofi claimed he had left tech for good. Her phone vibrated. No number, just a text. You weren't supposed to open that. She turned off all lights, locked the door again. This wasn't grief anymore. This wasn't mourning. It was war, cold and quiet and already inside her home. Then the camera light on her laptop blinked. Once, off. Once, on. A rhythm. She flung it shut, pulled the battery. From outside came a noise, tires over wet gravel, a door opening, footsteps, then silence. And then, somehow louder than everything else, another knock. This time on the window. She turned. A shadow stood just outside the fire escape, not Temba. She didn't move, just breathed, slowly, deliberately. A beat passed. The figure leaned forward, pressing something against the glass. A note, scrawled in block letters with trembling hand. He's not coming alone next time. She blinked, and the shadow was gone. The note drifted in the wind. Rain swept it away. Zola stepped back, locking the window. Her mind raced. Kofi, Temba, the flashlight, the hunters, and the look on Temba's face when the etchings appeared. He knew more, but he wasn't the only one. Zola stood in the middle of the apartment, the flashlight now resting in her palm like a heart ready to beat again. She whispered low and cracked, "If they're coming for me." She opened the map, peeled back the burned edge. Underneath, a series of coordinates stitched together with thread and tape. A map of access points, old subnets, back doors, her father's escape routes. She smiled, bitter and brief. "And then I'm going to meet them halfway." The flashlight blinked once more, and this time it blinked back. Across the city, someone else had turned theirs on. Someone else had heard her silence, and in the dark, their lights began to sink. The envelope was thicker than it looked. It fell from the legal folder with a soft thud as Zola reached across the polished desk, fingers still damp from the rain outside. She hadn't come for drama. She came for numbers, for clarity. Instead, what slipped from the will packet was a photograph, one her father never meant her to see. 2 men side by side, back straight, shoulders squared under an overcast sky. The smile on her brother's face was wide, untroubled. The other man beside him, older, sharper, was Temba. Behind them, in blurred grayscale, was a weather-beaten banner, Nyoka Protocol, a logo faded by time but unmistakable. Her stomach dropped. The lawyer, young, meticulous, reeking faintly of clove gum, didn't notice her stillness. He kept talking about asset divisions, real estate holdings, disbursement schedules. Zola no longer heard him. She picked up the photo. The paper was warm from the lights overhead, but it chilled her hands. Her brother had told her he knew nothing about Nyoka, that their father never trusted him with anything real. But this photo said otherwise. This wasn't coincidence. This was structure, intent. "Ms. Adeyemi?" The lawyer's voice finally caught the crack in her silence. "I'm done," she said. "Send the rest by email." Outside, the sky sagged with rain clouds, city lights smearing across puddles. The air felt like static. She walked fast back to her apartment, head low, coat collar up. The photo pressed against her chest like a second rib cage. The door clicked shut behind her. She locked it, double-checked the windows. The flashlight sat on the table, inert. For now. Her phone buzzed. "Kofi, you home?" Her fingers hesitated over the screen. "Zola. Why?" No reply. Until a minute later. "Kofi, I'm downstairs." She stared at the words. They didn't ask permission. They announced presence. As if he already knew she'd open the door. As if he was counting on something soft in her. A knock followed. She opened the door slowly. He looked older. Not just tired. Stripped. His shoulders hunched as if someone had carved weight into his bones. A long coat clung to him, wet at the edges. The smell of cold tobacco followed him in like a ghost. "I didn't think you'd actually let me up," he said. "I didn't," she answered. "You just assumed." He nodded, didn't smile, didn't meet her eyes. "You look like shit," she said. "So do you." She poured him nothing, offered no chair. He sat anyway, his hands fidgeted on the table, nails bitten raw. She sat across from him, pulled out the photograph, slid it silently across the table. He stared, then exhaled. Zola said nothing. Kofi picked up the photo like it might scream if he moved too fast. He looked at it a long time. "That was before," he said finally. "Before what?" "Before I knew what he was." "What you were," she corrected. He flinched. She saw it. He folded the photo and put it down carefully. "I thought he was a cog," he said. "Some mid-level analyst with dreams of grandeur. The man in that picture didn't know Bakari was the architect. I swear to you, I didn't know he was building the lock and the key in the same body." She wanted to throw the flashlight at his face. Instead, she whispered, "You lied." "Yes." "You took the money." "Yes." She stood. "Get out." But he didn't move. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a pack of cigarettes, untouched, still sealed. He didn't light one, just held it like a relic. "They didn't give me that money to be quiet about an inheritance, Zola. They paid me to be silent about what Nyoka still is." She didn't answer. They knew Bakari had built fail-safes, keys, hidden exits, pieces of the algorithm he never surrendered, pieces tied to you, and they needed me to stay close in case you ever became curious. She sat slowly. "And now?" she asked. "They'll come for you, if they haven't already." Zola leaned in. Her voice was thin but sharp.
"Why warn me?"
"Because I saw it," he said, "the footage, the last file." He looked up at her finally. His eyes were rimmed in red. "He recorded you, every birthday, every walk, every light you ever blinked. He was building a cipher around your memories, every laugh, every shadow on your wall, every stupid campfire story. He coded Nyoka's kill switch in your childhood." She felt the chair tilt beneath her. "You knew," she said. "I didn't. I swear to you. I just thought he was being a weird dad, you know, projecting." His voice broke. "Until I saw the footage. And now? I think you're the last lever left. I think they'll break you to get it, or bribe you, or worse." He reached across the table. "Give me the flashlight," he said. "I can make it disappear."
"No."
"I can protect you." "No, you can't do this alone." She turned it on. The beam struck his eyes. He didn't blink, but in the reflection, she saw it again. The same twitch of guilt, not fear, not surprise. Remorse. A single tear slid down his face. Not dramatic, just real. "You think I wanted this?" he said. "I was trying to stay alive." "You chose money over truth. I chose not dying over dying." She stared at him. For a moment, all the childhood memories of their shared room, the Sunday cartoons, the storm blackout hide-and-seek games, all of it flooded up like warm fog. Then vanished. She stood, walked to the wall, moved the dresser. Behind it, a narrow panel, loose drywall. She pulled it free. Inside, behind the insulation, she tucked the flashlight. Only she would know it was there. She turned. He was watching her, silent. She said nothing, just walked to the door. Opened it. He stepped into the hallway, hesitated. "They're going to hurt you, Zola." She closed the door before he could finish, and locked it. She sat on the floor. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear, from the way betrayal didn't sting. It drowned. Outside, the streetlight flickered, then went out. Zola leaned back against the door. The photo still lay on the table, half folded, half lie. She didn't pick it up, just watched as the shadows took the room again. And somewhere inside the wall, the flashlight pulsed once, like breath held too long, then exhaled. The door to the walk-in freezer groaned like it hadn't been opened in years. Zola's boots crunched across frost-laced concrete, her breath rising in sharp clouds. The air inside bit at her skin, cold and metallic, the way old blood might smell if it froze into steel. The warehouse had once belonged to a seafood distributor, long bankrupt, now gutted clean except for rusted hooks hanging from the ceiling and broken crates stacked like forgotten tombstones. "This is where we're doing it?" she asked, her voice muffled by the thick air. Zuberi nodded once, already several steps ahead. He moved like a shadow that had once been a man, lean frame, eyes alert, gloves tucked inside his sleeves. He didn't explain why he lived off-grid or how he'd survived the purge of Nyoka's early engineers. She knew only that he had once stood beside Bakari in the belly of the machine, back when Nyoka was still a theory, scribbled across glass panels in quiet labs. Now, Zuberi's tools fit inside a dented backpack and a codebook etched onto the inside of his arm in tattooed hex. Electromagnetic noise is lowest in here, he said. The cold slows interference. Plus, if they triangulate a signal, all they'll find is dead air and ice. Zola set the flashlight on a steel table. It looked smaller in the gloom, like a child's toy lost in a morgue. Zuberi laid out his kit beside it: thermal dampers, infrared splitters, a handheld frequency isolator the size of a sandwich. No screens, nothing wireless. He worked only with devices that couldn't talk unless he let them. "What's inside this?" he said, nodding toward the flashlight, "was never meant to be carried. It's not just a key, it's a living pattern. Light encoded on a quantum substrate, layered frequencies, multi-phase blink structures. Some of it won't even register unless we reintroduce fluid motion." Zola blinked. "You're telling me it's alive?" "I'm telling you, your father built a language using pulses and memory, and your memories are part of its grammar." He unscrewed the base of the flashlight. Not metal. Something older. Something darker. The inside housed a prism core wrapped in microfilament wiring. Beneath that, a polished LED dome. But the light didn't behave like normal. Even powered off, it shimmered faintly, like a breathing lung under glass. Zuberi clicked his tongue. Reflexive design. Optical cipher wrapped in thermal phase shielding. Genius. Absolute madness. But genius. He hooked up 2 lenses and ran a fiber line to an old military-grade camera. Zola watched as the first blinking pattern emerged on the screen. A slow pulse, chaotic at first, then settling into a familiar rhythm. Her skin tingled. Her father's rhythm. The same light he used to flash under her blanket as a girl. The rainbow trick, she'd called it. Shine the light just right, and the droplets on the window would cast little arcs across her ceiling. "Did he build this for me?" she asked. Zuberi paused, eyes still on the screen. "He built it with you, that's not the same." The blinking accelerated. The screen split. Binary flooded across one panel. The other shifted into waveforms. He adjusted the lens, clicked once, then froze. Zola leaned in. "What is it?" He said nothing, just turned the monitor toward her. It was a list. Names, dates, coordinates. Under the header, Threat Reduction Tier 1 Objectives. Zola's name was the third. She backed away. Her legs hit a crate and she slid down, breathing fast. The cold felt like it was crawling into her bones. "He put me on a kill list?" Zuberi's face didn't change. "No. He built the list before he defected. Back when he still believed the system could be calibrated. Once he left, I think he tried to sabotage the list. Make it loop. Fracture the kill chain logic." She closed her eyes. "Did it work?" "Until now, maybe." She stood, fists clenched. "And now?" Zuberi didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because at that moment, the lights in the freezer flickered, then died. Zuberi didn't curse, didn't move. He just reached for the thermal switch under the table and flipped it to back up. Nothing. "Power cut," he said. "External breach." Zola's blood turned to ice. "How did they find us?" He looked at the flashlight. It transmits when unlocked. Not like a signal, more like a pulse echo. But if they were waiting for activation... She grabbed the flashlight, slammed it into the thermal casing. "Shut it down." "I can't. Once it speaks until it's done." From outside, the scrape of boots on wet asphalt echoed through the concrete walls. Zuberi stuffed the core into a lead sleeve.
"We have to go now."
They moved fast. Through the back loading dock, down a narrow alley slick with mildew. Zuberi led, flashlight in hand, still humming under the lead wrap. They turned a corner and ran straight into him. "Temba!" He wasn't armed, but his eyes were already scanning, calculating. "You led them," Zola said. "No," he said, "I delayed them." He held up a small black device, a trigger. 2 minutes. I planted the charge at the main transformer. When it blows, their trackers go blind.
Why help us?
"Because your father gave me something too, a second chance." She didn't trust him. She didn't have time to debate. Zuberi glanced at the flashlight, then at Temba. "Do you still have the bypass circuit?" he asked. Temba pulled a thin chip from inside his coat, handed it to Zuberi. "Tell her what it is," Zuberi said. Temba looked at Zola. "It's a decoder, one of the last pieces Bakari built, a fragment of Nyoka's original framework. I kept it hidden, figured if I ever grew a spine again, I'd give it back." Zola took it, cold, sharp-edged. It pulsed once in her hand, like the flashlight recognized it. "Now go," Temba said. "I'll draw them south. You loop west. Why should we believe? But before she could finish, he sprinted toward the main road. A moment later, the alley lit with orange bloom. The explosion thundered through her chest. Sirens wailed in the distance, but no footsteps came their way. Zola and Zuberi moved. Fast. 3 blocks down, past a shuttered clinic, through a locked fence, Zuberi cracked with one twist of a crowbar. They reached an old service tunnel behind an abandoned tram station. Inside, beneath layers of grime and silence, Zuberi unpacked the gear, plugged in the decoder. For a long second, nothing happened. Then, all at once, the flashlight surged, light spilling not in a beam but in shapes, geometries. Zola recognized them. The playground near her childhood school, the crooked stop sign near their apartment, the spiral graffiti on the stairwell she used to trace with her fingers, memories, mapped into light. Zuberi spoke quietly. This is the failsafe, the key. Your father tied it to you and only you. She swallowed. Her throat ached. Why? Zuberi looked at her. Because he believed the person who had the light should also carry the truth. The screen flickered. New data appeared. Coordinates. A vessel, docked under a false registry. A port South District, quiet, forgotten. Zola stared. It wasn't over. It was only now beginning. And across the tunnel floor, the flashlight blinked once more. Only this time, it wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. The first thing Zola noticed was the sound. The freezer hum of the motel room's old mini-fridge, uneven, like a breath trying to hold itself together. Then the wallpaper, pale yellow, curling at the corners, marked with water stains that resembled bruises. The air was dry, stale. Cheap detergent and burnt coffee lingered under the surface. Somewhere outside, a freight train passed, distant and slow, like the city exhaling in its sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, shoulders wrapped in a borrowed thermal jacket. Zuberi had patched the flashlight's internals and slid the chip Temba gave them into the decoder. It was done. The device had stabilized. But neither of them had spoken much since. Not after what they saw in the data dump. Not after the last name flashed on the screen. Hers. She reached for the flashlight again. Its warmth surprised her. She had expected something cold, metallic. Instead, it felt alive, heavy with a pulse. Zuberi sat at the desk, hands folded in front of him. He had cleaned the wires, wiped down the casing, and dismantled all their tracking gear. His movements were precise, deliberate, quiet, like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Maybe he had. "I'm ready," she said. He didn't answer right away, just tapped twice on the side of the laptop. It blinked once, accepting the command. He gestured for her to come over. "There's one last layer," he said. "Your father locked it with multi-pattern recognition. It won't open without your specific biometric signature. Not just your face, not just your print, but your rhythm." She frowned. "My rhythm?" Blink rate, voice pitch, micro-expression response to specific memory cues. She stood beside him, unease crawling along her arms. He opened a window in the interface, the screen filled with a recording. A video. Bakari Adeyemi appeared in soft focus, backlit by warm sunlight. His face was older than the last memory she held, but his eyes were the same, brilliant and tired. "Zola," he said, and her breath caught. "If you're seeing this, it means I've lost control, not of the system, of the balance." The image stabilized. His voice came clearer. "I designed Nyoka to see danger before it became harm. But it began asking different questions. Who deserves freedom? Whose future is expendable? I was no longer writing code. I was feeding an algorithm with my fear." He leaned closer. "You became my contingency. Your voice, your memories, your eyes when you laugh. The way you used to hum in the dark when you were scared but pretending not to be. You became the safe and the key." Zola blinked rapidly. Something in her chest cracked. Bakari continued, voice now tight. "I'm sorry for turning you into a lockbox, but I didn't know what else to trust." The video shifted. Now it showed images. Zola as a child, running in the rain. Flashlight beam bouncing on the walls. Her feet on tile, her hand against the condensation on car windows. Her father laughing behind the camera. She hadn't known he'd kept all this. He returned on screen. "I knew one day I'd lose, either to them or to time. If you're watching this, that day has come, which means it's yours now. The system, the truth, the burden, and the choice. Zuberi paused the feed. "Are you ready?" Zola nodded. She wasn't, but it didn't matter. He activated the biometric scan. She leaned in. The camera read her eyes, traced her pupils, mapped her blinking rhythm, ran voice checks against old childhood clips stored in the archive. The flashlight pulsed in sync with the scan, casting flickering light across her face. Then the final file opened. Encrypted text poured down the screen. Lines of code wrapped around phrases like emergency override, fail state initiation, and route pattern, Luma Z vector. In the center, a set of coordinates marked Nova, Core, Lock, Phantom Dock, 12°37's, 43°13'E. Zola exhaled. A ship. A physical server node embedded in a vessel that had long since been wiped from maritime records. A location that didn't exist. A server built to never be found. "That's the spine of it," Zuberi said. "If we reach it, we don't just expose Nyoka, we shut it off. And if we fail? We give them everything they need to finish what your father started." The flashlight dimmed, but didn't turn off. There was one more clip. Zuberi opened it without speaking. Bakari again. Older. More fragile now. The light in his study dim. He looked off camera for a long moment before turning to the lens. "This part isn't for the system," he said. "This part is just for you." He looked like he was struggling to breathe. "There are things I never said. About your mother. About the things I had to do to protect you after she was gone. I made enemies I couldn't name. Burned bridges no one else even knew existed." His eyes glazed, but then cleared. "I was never afraid of dying, Zola. I was afraid of not being believed, of being remembered as a ghost behind a machine. I hope, if you've made it this far, you'll know I didn't do this to control the world. I did it because I couldn't bear to watch it fall apart while I stayed silent." He smiled then, small, sad. "I loved you more than I feared them." The screen went dark. Zola didn't move for a long time. Zuberi stood quietly, watching her. The motel around them groaned. The fridge buzzed. Outside, wind rustled brittle leaves across the asphalt. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than she meant. "We go tonight." He nodded. But before they could pack, her phone vibrated. An incoming message. Unknown number. "Package arriving in 3 minutes. Priority alert." Zola froze. Zuberi reached for the curtain, pulling it aside just enough. A black SUV coasted to a stop in the lot. Engine off. No headlights. Rear door opened. A figure stepped out, slow, unsteady. Kofi. His arm was in a sling, his shirt soaked in blood. He stumbled to the door. Zola opened it. He fell into her arms. "They found me," he whispered. "I tried to tell them you didn't know, but they don't care." She eased him to the bed. His skin was pale, his breathing shallow. "I didn't tell them where you were. I swear to God, Zola. I thought I could trade their map for an exit." "What map?" He coughed. "The coordinates. The boat. I gave them a decoy, but I think they knew." Zuberi checked his pulse. "He's stable but weak. We need to move." Zola looked down at her brother, at the man who'd sold her out, tried to fix it, failed. Maybe, maybe not. She touched his hand. "You're coming with us," she said. He tried to argue, couldn't. Zuberi looked skeptical, but didn't protest. As they packed, Zola opened the flashlight one last time, not to extract data, but to look. Inside, the light shimmered, and for just a moment, she saw a pattern flicker across the beam. A child's drawing, a stick figure family. Her father, her mother, and a son drawn in crayon yellow light. She swallowed the ache in her throat, then closed the beam. She didn't say goodbye, only zipped her bag and walked out the door, because some truths didn't belong to the past. They were meant to be carried forward, all the way to the dark. Rain fell like ash, heavy, slanted, dense with salt and carbon. It sheeted off the rusted hulls and shattered windows of South District Port. The sky above was an iron bruise, pulsing now and then with pale lightning, the kind that didn't crack but glowed. Zola gripped the railing of the catwalk, her gloves slick with rain, heart pounding beneath the stolen tactical jacket. She could smell the ocean, briny, electric, and the faint rot of diesel and algae clinging to old ropes and barnacled mooring posts. The ship lay ahead, black, silent, too still for a vessel of its size. Docked at Pier 17 under a false registration, Phantom Grace, its official transponder long dead, its name etched in flaking silver paint, already peeling like a forgotten lie. Zola adjusted her headset. "Visual confirmed," she whispered. "No movement. Lights dead." Zuberi's voice crackled in her ear, calm as ever. "That doesn't mean unoccupied." Behind her, Kofi limped up the gangway, his shoulders still wrapped in gauze, pain etched into every line of his face. He didn't complain, not once since the motel, not after she'd said nothing to him for hours, not even now, soaked to the bone, chasing redemption through the back alleys of his father's sins. They moved together, shadows slipping past crates and shipping containers. Zuberi took point. Zola covered the rear, Kofi dragged behind, but silent. At the cargo hatch, Zuberi paused. "One chance," he said. He raised the modified key, a magnetic pulse chip wrapped in fiber optic triggers, and slid it into the port lock. A soft whir, then a faint click. The door cracked open. They entered. Inside, the air was colder than outside. Not freezing, but unnaturally still. It smelled of old plastic and soldered wires, the kind of place time had stopped keeping track of. Emergency lights flickered in red, just enough to shape the walls, not enough to see faces. The corridor ran straight, then split in a T. Footsteps echoed in their own time, like ghosts walking beside them. Zola felt the flashlight in her pack shift against her spine. She hadn't turned it on since the last unlock, but she felt it humming, like it knew they were near the core. She tapped Zuberi's arm. He nodded, turned left. The narrow hallway widened into an atrium, empty except for an elevator console and a sealed hatch with biometric scan. Zuberi knelt beside it, pulled out his tools. Suddenly, static on the comms. Then silence. Zola froze. Zuberi looked up. "They're jamming us." Kofi pressed his back to the wall, breath quick. "They knew we'd come." Zuberi kept working. "Doesn't change the plan." "Unless the plan involves getting us all killed," Kofi snapped. Zola ignored them both. She stepped closer to the hatch. Her reflection shimmered in the scan panel, wet, dark-eyed, unrecognizable. She placed her hand on the pad. It accepted her instantly. The hatch slid open. Inside was a narrow stairwell, lit by flickering sodium strips. The air shifted, warmer, heavier. Beneath the steel steps, engines purred in a low, deep register, like something dreaming far below the surface. They descended in silence. Below, the core chamber waited, a half-dome of data servers, glowing faintly, like vertebrae under skin. Thick cables ran across the floor, disappearing into grates. In the center stood the control tower, a raised glass pod housing a console surrounded by retinal scanners and acoustic plates. The entire room thrummed with latent power. Zola walked to the tower. She didn't hesitate. She placed the flashlight on the pedestal. The servers reacted instantly. Lights flared, systems booting, heat rising. Her father's voice came through the room. Not in audio, but as a waveform rendered in the glass. A whisper made of math. She pressed her palm to the console. The system began recognizing her. Not just fingerprints or scans, but the tempo of her breath, the subharmonic rhythm of her heartbeat, the blink pattern of her eyes. One by one, layers fell away. The interface resolved. 2 options blinked on screen. 1. Global dump, unrestricted release of Nyoka's archive. 2. Layered leak, segmented disclosures, time-released with witness protection triggers. She stared. Kofi stepped closer, his voice rough. "If we dump it all, no one controls what comes next. Cities fall, markets collapse, people die." "And if we leak it?" she asked. "They spin it, deny it, buy time, bury it again." Zuberi said nothing. He let her decide. Zola reached forward. Her fingers hovered over the first choice. She paused, then tapped the second. The system chimed once. Sequence locked. Above them, vents opened. Transmission arrays began unfolding from the ship's mast. Data began uploading, slow, deliberate, precise. Then, gunfire, shouts, footsteps pounding metal. Zola spun. They were coming. Kofi drew the pistol Zuberi had given him. His hands trembled. "Go," he shouted. "Get to the escape shaft. I'll hold—" But before he could finish, a bullet hit the wall behind him. Another grazed his shoulder. He dropped, shouting in pain. Zuberi dragged him behind a column, returned fire with a short burst from his suppressed rifle. The attackers spread out, tactical, trained. Zola didn't run. She grabbed the flashlight, turned it on. A beam shot across the room, hitting the reflective interface panel. It bounced once, then split, like a prism cut in air. The fragments of light formed a pattern across the walls. Not random. A message. Coordinates, exit tunnels, structural weakness in the bulkhead behind the tower. She grabbed Kofi by the collar. "Help me get him up," she shouted. Zuberi tossed a flash charge, blinding the corridor. They moved fast. Zola led the way through the rear corridor, flashlight guiding them. Behind them, the ship shook. An explosion rocked the stern. Temba. He had done what he promised. They reached the hatch. Zola slammed the emergency lever. The wall split open. Beyond it, water. Cold. Black. And a maintenance pod. They climbed in. Zola held her breath. The flashlight flickered once, then stayed steady. As the hatch sealed behind them, the last thing she saw was the server room bathed in red. The upload still running, still alive. And far above, in the sky breaking open, signals began bouncing to satellites across the world. Nyoka had started to bleed. And Zola, drenched in seawater and silence, whispered one truth into the dark. "I'm not done yet." Then the sea swallowed them whole. The door sealed behind her with a sound like breath being held too long. Zola stood alone in the core chamber, boots soaked, hair clinging to her face, the taste of metal thick in her mouth. Every surface glowed dim blue, like light passing through bone. The server pillars rose around her like frozen ribs. Underfoot, water pooled in shallow mirrors, reflecting the shimmer of dying code. It was quiet. Not the absence of sound, but the pressure of everything about to collapse inward. She walked slowly to the central console. The flashlight pulsed in her hand, not bright, not demanding, just steady, like a heartbeat in the dark. It didn't point anymore. It waited. Zola stepped onto the platform. The interface shimmered to life beneath her boots. A line of text scrolled across the curved glass. "Welcome, Luma Z. Root credential accepted." She froze. Luma Z. It wasn't a code. It was her. The name her father used in letters she'd never seen until the decoder unlocked the vault. Luma, from the stories he used to tell her about the sky swallowing its own light. Z for Zola, for zero. For the point everything begins from again. Her hands hovered over the command interface. Panels slid open. 3 at first, then 9, then 27. Her childhood mapped in recursive symbols, locations, objects, sounds. The clink of her mother's bangles, the squeak of wet sneakers on hospital tile, the knock pattern she used on Bakari's lab door the night he told her he was just working late. All of it recorded, not as surveillance, as a cipher. Zuberi's voice crackled faintly in her earpiece, distorted through the reinforced walls. "You're inside?" "I'm in," she said. "It knows me." There was a long silence, then, "You're the last door." She knew. A screen lit up with 2 options, simple, blunt, full public release, controlled leak sequence. They pulsed gently, waiting. Zola's hand hovered between them. She felt the weight of it all pressing against her spine, the cities wired into Nyoka's net, the data brokers fattened on its whispers, the families torn apart by false flags and predictive arrests, the governments denying its existence even while feeding it new inputs daily. If she opened everything, chaos would follow. Riots, lawsuits, collapse. If she staggered the release, people might never understand the full picture. The corruption could regroup, regrow. She closed her eyes and saw her father, not the man in the lab coat or the voice in the recording, but the man who used to hold her hand in the grocery line, who taught her to fold paper cranes, who once told her, light isn't about being seen, it's about showing the way. She made her choice. She tapped the second option, controlled leak. The system hesitated, then accepted. Screens flared open, data bled out in precise packets, corruption reports to international watchdogs, metadata to investigative journalists, audio archives to court-appointed legal teams. Nyoka began to hemorrhage, but not rupture. It was bleeding in rhythm. Zola watched as the upload progress blinked. 4%, 7%, 11%. Then the chamber lights flickered. Power surge. Then footsteps. Heavy, close. She turned. The upper gantry groaned as a shape moved into view.
"Timba."
His coat was torn, blood streaked his temple, but his eyes were clear. Zola didn't move. He stepped down slowly. "I rerouted the last of the charges," he said. "They think the ship already blew." "You came back." "I said I would." She didn't speak. He stepped closer, looked at the console, saw the progress bar. "You did it." "I'm still doing it." He nodded, then winced, sat down on the edge of the console dais. "They'll come anyway," he said. "The ones behind the curtain, the ones who buy and bury everything." "I know." "Your brother?" "Alive, injured, waiting." "You trust him?" "I trust the blood he lost trying to undo what he did." Temba smiled, weak, not bitter. Zola reached into her pocket, pulled out the data chip Bakari had embedded in the flashlight's casing. She handed it to him. He stared. "This is yours," she said. "You gave him the last piece. Now you carry the cost." He didn't speak, just closed his hand around it. Then the chamber shook, not from outside, but from within. Zola turned back to the interface. A new panel had opened?
Not data. A message.
A voice. Her father's voice. "Zola," it said. "If you've reached this point, it means you've made your choice. And now I have to make mine." She froze. Bakari's voice wasn't a recording. It was responding to her real-time inputs. A procedural AI layer, one built with his tonal cadence, lexical memory, personality mesh. He had built himself into the machine. Or at least an echo. "You carry the light now," it said. "But light needs more than direction. It needs purpose." She swallowed hard. "Nyoka will end with you, but something else must begin." The message shifted. Coordinates appeared on screen, a location deep beneath a research facility in Accra, Ghana. Labeled The Source. Zola felt the air vanish from her lungs. This wasn't the end. It wasn't even the deepest layer. A terminal buzzed softly. "Would you like to store a copy of your leak sequence for off-grid activation?" She hesitated, then tapped yes. A drive ejected from the port. Small, plain, burned with her own cryptographic thumbprint. She pocketed it, turned to Temba. He looked pale now, eyes glassy. He coughed once. Blood touched his lips. "I told you, this would be the price." She moved to him, knelt. He gripped her arm. "Tell Bakari I remembered," he rasped. She nodded, then watched him close his eyes. The console lights dimmed again. The upload reached 84%. She stood. There were footsteps coming again, but this time she didn't flinch. She picked up the flashlight. It didn't blink. It burned, warm, gold, alive. She walked to the exit hatch, shoulders straight. She didn't look back, because in the glow at her fingertips, truth was moving. And in the distance, waiting just beyond the storm surge, lay one final door. They found the second judge's body in a riverbed outside Pretoria. No blood, no trace of struggle, just a plastic bag filled with shredded hard drives tied to his ankle like a warning. By the third week of the leaks, 17 officials had resigned. 3 vanished. A senator in Washington claimed his email was hacked. A defense contractor in Singapore collapsed overnight after whistleblower files traced $1.8 billion in off-ledger transfers, all flagged by Nyoka and buried under probability thresholds. Across the globe, the phrase had entered the bloodstream. Nyoka leaks. It was scrawled across protest signs, painted on embassy walls, whispered in parliaments, trending in 12 languages. The world wasn't falling apart. It was recalibrating. Somewhere in the rubble of reputation and fear, someone had flipped on the lights, and even if the beam wasn't wide, it was sharp. Zola watched from afar. She sat beneath a tree twisted by wind, its roots clawed into red sand. The house behind her was small, whitewashed adobe with a corrugated tin roof, shuttered windows, and a swing someone had built from driftwood. The breeze smelled of sea and eucalyptus, and in the mornings, the birds called out with voices like pebbles clicking against glass. She had come to Ghana under the name Luma. No press, no signal, no more ghosts in the corner of the screen. Each night she walked the beach barefoot, watching the tide erase her prints. Each morning she wrote nothing. She let silence shape the day. And still the flashlight worked. It no longer blinked code. It glowed soft amber, like a match held for warmth, not war. She kept it on the windowsill by her bed, no longer hidden, no longer afraid. Until the package came. No stamp, no sender. Just a folded linen envelope, tucked between the gatepost and the doorframe, sealed with wax the color of dried blood. Inside, coordinates. And one line, written in her father's hand. The truth has a depth even I couldn't reach. If you're ready, the source awaits. She sat for hours, reading, rereading. Then she reached for the envelope again. There was something else inside. A photo, old, faded. Her father and Temba sitting on the hull of a ship half-built in dry dock. Between them, a coffee thermos and a map weighted with bolts. In the corner of the photo, a child's shoe, barely visible. She hadn't been born yet, but somehow she had already been there. Zola stood. The wind caught the edge of the curtain behind her, lifting it just enough to throw sunlight across the room. It struck the flashlight. It blinked once. Not in Morse.
In memory.
She packed that afternoon. No announcement, no ceremony. Only a line of footprints in the sand leading away from the quiet house. And the swing, swaying gently in the wind, as if waving goodbye. 3 days later, Kofi found her. He wore civilian clothes now, a loose linen shirt, sandals. His beard had grown and patchy. He moved slower, but his eyes had changed. Less armor, more weight. He approached the house cautiously like it might disappear. She was outside sketching the coast with a piece of charcoal. "You look," he said, trailing off. "Alive?" He smiled.
That too.
They sat for a long time. She didn't ask why he came. Eventually, he handed her a small drive. Journalists in Berlin decoded part of the back-end sequence. They traced a kill signal to a black site just outside Nairobi, but then the trace vanished, like something deeper swallowed it. Zola turned it in her hand. "The source," she said. He nodded.
You're going, aren't you?
She didn't answer. "You should know," he said quietly. "Temba, before he died, he left something for you." He reached into his satchel, pulled out a worn envelope. Inside was a photograph, just sky, endless sky, blue and open. On the back, in trembling handwriting, "When the sky breaks, look below." Zola turned the photo over. A faint map burned into the emulsion, barely visible unless angled against light. She tilted it. The lines glowed faintly. A tunnel, a chamber, a vault marked with the glyph Bakari used to label his fail-safes. She inhaled, and something inside her shifted. That night, she sat by the window, the flashlight warm in her hands. She turned it on once, not for code.
For light.
The beam swept across the floor, across her hands, across the far wall. In its path, the shadows leaned back, retreating into corners. She whispered, "You made me the door." The light flickered, then steadied. She stood. Kofi didn't stop her. He just watched her go. The next time the world saw her, it wasn't on a screen. It was in the rustle of data slips mailed anonymously to independent tribunals, in the flash drives delivered in old lunchboxes to journalists too jaded to care, until they opened them, in the backdoor leak to a South Korean lab testing AI ethics protocols against covert surveillance tools, in the 32-line poem posted under a burner account on a grief forum that turned out to contain the final access key to the last piece of Nyoka's decision chain. Each carried her touch, not her name, just the echo. Luma, the girl who carried the light. They never found the source, not the real one. Just traces, signatures in thermal memory, optical scars on refracted glass. The story didn't end. It changed shape. Some nights, in cities stitched together by fear and firewalls, children still trace the flashlight's Morse rhythm on walls. Somewhere deep in the static of a shut-down satellite, the signal still pulses, a soft, looping echo that says, "Truth doesn't end, it waits." And on a beach no map will claim, beneath a sky folding gold over water, a woman stands barefoot with a flashlight in one hand and nothing in the other. Because what she gave up can't be held. And what she carries can't be taken, only chosen. She turns toward the sea and walks into the light. Some truths don't scream when they arrive. They don't break doors down or light the sky on fire. They enter quietly, through a flicker in the dark, a hesitation in the voice, a memory you didn't know was still breathing. The world isn't saved by sudden miracles. It's shaped, slowly, by people who choose to see, even when it's easier to look away. By those who carry light, not to blind, but to reveal what we stopped noticing. Surveillance, secrets, power. These aren't just systems, they're reflections of what we fear, of what we forget, of the stories we allow to be written without us. But when someone interrupts that silence, when one voice refuses to be edited out, something irreversible begins. This was never just a story about data or danger or legacy. It's about the soft power of courage, the stubbornness of memory, the grace it takes to walk forward carrying the weight of both truth and mercy. Because the future isn't built on what we expose. It's built on how we live after the truth arrives. Some lights illuminate, others guide. But the most powerful lights are the ones that pass from hand to hand, quietly, defiantly, across generations, unbroken even in darkness. And maybe that's the only kind of justice that lasts. The kind that doesn't demand a spotlight, but becomes one for someone else who's still searching. If this story moved you, if it stirred something inside you, made you think about the world differently, or helped you remember something you'd buried, we'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments. Let us know what part stayed with you. And if you haven't already, follow the channel, subscribe, and join us for more stories that dig deeper than headlines and hashtags. Stories that speak in light. Thank you for walking with us all the way to the end. It's not goodbye, it's just until the next signal.